Is that really our music? Wow. That was great. Good evening and welcome to the Atheist Experience. This show is brought to you by the Atheist Community of Austin. I'm the host, Jeff D. My co-host is Martin Wagner, and our guest today is Dr. Alan Glasser, theoretical and computational plasma physicist working in fusion research at Los Alamos National Lab.
Wow.
Welcome to the show. We are live April 8, 2001. The Atheist Community of Austin is a non-profit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We have weekly meetings, Sunday mornings at the Hot Jumbo Bagel Shop, 307 West 5th Street, at 10:30 a.m., except for the first Sunday of each month when we have our lecture series at 11 a.m. in the Longhorn Room of Furs Cafeteria at North Cross Mall. ACA board meetings take place at noon right after our regular meeting on the second Sunday of every month. Those meetings are open to all ACA members, but you can only vote if you're on the board of directors. This was a board of directors meeting today, which I missed.
And so did I. Don't.
Let's see. The Godless Gamers meet every Thursday night at 7 o'clock at the home of Wendy Britton. Our ACA Happy Hour takes place at Waterloo Ice House on Burnett at 7 p.m. on Wednesday evenings. For more information, you can call our voicemail number at 371-2911 or visit our website, www.atheist-community.org, right there on the screen, as Martin just indicated.
Well,
let's see. Let's skip some of that stuff. You got news?
I got a little bit of news.
Let's do some news.
Yeah, I'm just going to do my two most prominent news features in order to give the good doctor time to give his presentation, because he has a lot of interesting stuff to talk about.
Great.
So, hi kids. Here's the news for Sunday, April the 8th. Scientists discover secrets behind aging process. A common hormone-based mechanism seems to regulate the aging process in a variety of organisms. Scientists revealed in a finding that raises the possibility that hormonal therapy could add decades to the human lifespan. 3 studies appearing in the journal Science show that the insulin signaling pathway, already known to regulate aging in roundworms, serves the same function in fruit flies and the simple life form yeast. Scientists studying fruit flies at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, and University College London found that manipulating genes relating to insulin-like hormones greatly extended the insect's lifespan. But some of the flies lived up to 85% longer than usual, but the longer-living flies were all dwarfs. So there's a bit of a nasty side effect there.
Trade-off there.
Yeah. That might be a little bit more of a price than most people would be willing to pay. But anyway, quote, what's exciting...
twice as long, but be half as tall.
What's exciting about these findings is that they suggest that there is a genetic system common to all animals that regulates aging, says David Gems of University College London. If we could just tap into the mammalian version of that system, it might be possible to retard or even reverse human aging, at least in principle. It's an important qualifier, of course.
This is still ongoing research.
Sure, yeah. The findings hint at the possibility in the future of employing a type of hormonal treatment to extend the lifespan of people. Experiments involving mice suggested that about 40 healthy years could be added to the human lifespan. After 10 to 20 years of experiments, scientists might have an idea of how to apply the results to people without involving...
By then, 20 of my extra 40 years will be gone!
Oh, darn. Well, yeah. So you'll just get to be, you can still, do the George Burns thing. And, that's cool.
Okay.
Anyway, but that's interesting.
Take up cigars.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it's all highly theoretical and still in the experimental stage, but hey, it's neat. Now, every once in a while, I unearth a bit of news that just kind of makes you go, wow. And this is one of those, I think. I found this highly entertaining. You might not, but I have a weird sense of humor.
It's our show, so
yeah,
you'll just have to sit there and take it.
Deal with it, yeah. The former Bishop of Edinburgh, Scotland, said he no longer believed Jesus was the Son of God, quote, literally and biologically, and thought that the church was going down the tubes. The Most Reverend Richard Holloway, who retired as leader of the Scottish Episcopal Church in October, said he believed Jesus was simply, quote, an extraordinary man. The bishop chose to retire early as Primus of Scotland after clashing with the Archbishop of Canterbury and other conservative bishops over their teaching on homosexuality. Bishop Holloway has been a member of the lesbian and gay Christian movement for 5 years, but he is not homosexual. Now free of his mitre, Bishop Holloway says he has experienced a, quote, seismic event in his thinking. That's how it usually works. And now sees the Bible and the church differently. The central Christian, this is a great part. The central Christian claims, he said, were, quote, metaphors for living a good and humane life, and that asking people to believe them at face value is like asking people to believe that the Emperor Alexander, quote, had a 3-hour piss one afternoon in the sands of Arabia. It's like, wow. That's like,
now, was that a common myth over in England?
I don't know, but...
oh, very, very strange.
Yeah, so it's just wacky things going on over there in the British Isles.
Now,
so,
what was his title? You said
he was the former Bishop of Edinburgh.
The most reverend. Shouldn't he be the not quite as reverend Richard Holloway now?
The reverend not appearing in this film.
Formerly reverend.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
So this guy has been a bit of a controversial figure in the British religious community for some time, and a bit of an embarrassment to them, because he makes these indelicate remarks that make them uncomfortable. So it's just one of those where I read that, it just.
Can I do just a short pseudoscience news thing?
You can, because
we didn't get to this last week.
Yeah, you can, because I'm done.
I know we're short on time today, but it's just quite short, and it's pseudoscience news, which is near and dear to my heart. Mm-hmm. Princess Diana swore by the healing power of crystals, while Cherie Blair always wears hers as a pendant around her neck to warn off harmful rays from computers and mobile phones. But that faith, shared by a host of other celebrities, was yesterday exposed as a myth by a new study. And that's yesterday, a week ago, I'm afraid. Thank you. Scientists addressing the first day of the British Psychological Society's centenary conference compared the reactions of a group who were told to meditate while clutching real crystals bought from New Age shops with others who were unknowingly given fakes made from paste. While those with the genuine article reported an uplifting increase in concentration powers, heightened energy levels, and better spiritual well-being, exactly the same feelings were reported by those who held the fake crystals.
That's such an obvious test. I'm amazed no one ever thought of it before.
It's like the thing that the little grade school girl did with Therapeutic Touch a couple of years back.
Right, yeah, just simple double-blinded.
Dr. Christopher French at Goldsmiths College London, who led the research, said, "The power of suggestion, either explicit or implicit, seems to be the not-so-mysterious power that may convince many that crystals have the potential to work miracles."
Yeah. You've heard what the response to one of Britain's leading New Age figures was to this study. He said, "Oh, well, they just weren't given the right kind of crystals." Which is like, but wait a minute, but they reported the right results.
That they worked, and
so
that clearly is the point.
Yeah, that's the whole. So it was
right.
really, really amusing.
Well, let's have some. Let's have the views of an actual scientist.
Yeah, let's hear a little.
We're just a couple of artists and
it's physics
game
time.
guys with an atheist TV show. Dr. Glasser, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
The floor is yours.
Okay. I'm an atheist. The word atheist means without God, nothing more, nothing less. There is no atheist pope. There's no atheist church. There's nobody who can tell me what a good atheist is supposed to believe. So all I'm going to tell you about is what I believe.
It's actually kind of hard to
Right.
get it just right
Okay.
for everyone.
When I say without God, what's primarily in my mind is the Western Judeo-Christian God, by which I mean some supreme being who was responsible for creating the universe and who can intervene in the universe and is himself all-knowing, all-powerful, all good. So this is what I mean when I say I don't believe in him. And in my understanding, when religious people turn to God and to religion, they do so in search of answers to two classes of questions: questions of fact and questions of value. What is and what ought. Mm-hmm. Since I reject God and religion, I want to tell you what I turn to instead, because even atheists have questions about these big things. As a scientist, a physicist, I find it natural to turn to science to answer questions of fact. And there are big questions. Where did the world come from? The universe. Where did life come from? Where do we come from? Where do we go? I want to tell you some of the answers that I find in science. And in some sense, you could regard these as stories, just like Bible stories. But the difference in science is that these stories are rooted in things that we can observe and in our own logic, our own reason. Science appeals to observation, logic, reason, and unlike religion, where the answers come to us sort of packaged and in a way that we're not supposed to question, in science, the name of the game is questioning. Everybody is allowed to question. And the strength of science is that with everybody questioning the answers, there's a constant renewal of our understanding and a deepening of it. There are always frontiers to what we understand. And what we can hope to do over long periods of time is to constantly push back these frontiers. There's never a time when there isn't a frontier. There are always things that we don't know, that we don't understand. And I want to give you some examples. Our best understanding of the overall history of the universe is that our known universe originated in a Big Bang. Why do we believe this? Is this just like, and God created the universe out of nothing? Well, let me tell you how we know this. Here on Earth, if we take a strip of copper, or in fact any element, and put it in a flame, and if we pass the light from that flame through a prism or diffraction grating, spreading it out into its separate colors, we see patterns. We see stripes of dark and light. And these patterns are like fingerprints that we can use to recognize the individual elements. Mm-hmm. If we turn our most powerful telescopes on the most distant galaxies, we see these same patterns indicating that they're made of the same elements, but with a major difference, which is that the patterns appear all to be shifted toward the red end of the spectrum. This is the red shift. We understand why they're shifted toward the red. It's the Doppler effect. You may have experienced this effect if you've ever stood by a railroad track and seen a train go by with its whistle on. What you hear is, because when the train is rushing towards us, the sound is upshifted toward a higher pitch, and when it's going away from us, it's downshifted toward a lower pitch. The same thing happens with light, because light is a wave just like sound. And the faster something is moving away from us, the more these patterns are shifted toward the red. Then we see something very interesting also, which is that the further away one of these galaxies is, the faster it's receding. We can understand that in terms of the whole universe expanding. And we can use the relationship between distance and velocity to estimate how long ago the whole thing came from a point. And that was the Big Bang, and that happened 13 billion years ago or thereabouts.
Give or take.
Yeah.
A few hundred million years.
Well, that's one line of evidence. There are two more. A second line of evidence is that, well, back in 1965, there were these two guys in Holmdel, New Jersey at Bell Labs with a microwave horn. This was in the early days of satellite communications. They were perfecting their microwave horn. They had hiss that they didn't know where it came from. They thought for a while that it might be pigeon droppings. It turned out that this hiss came from outer space. And it was the same whether you turned the horn this way or this way. In other words, it was completely independent of direction. And we take this hiss now, we understand this hiss to be like the afterglow of the Big Bang. It's microwave radiation, very low frequency. It corresponds to a temperature of 3 degrees above absolute zero. But what happened was that when the universe expanded, it went from fantastically hot to this very low temperature because over these 13 billion years, it has had that much time to cool off because of the expansion. In fact, we can use the temperature of this radiation today to estimate how long it took for it to reach this temperature, and we get the same answer, 13 billion years. The fact that these two very different sources give us such similar answers bolsters our confidence that we have the right answer. There's a third line of evidence that I'll touch on very briefly, which is that we can calculate if the whole universe was originally made of the simplest element, which is hydrogen, and that hydrogen burned up in the Big Bang to produce helium, we can compute the ratio of hydrogen to helium, and it comes out right, according to these other two models. So that's our best understanding of where the universe comes from. Using our best understanding of elementary particle physics, we can understand what happened in that Big Bang back to 10 to the minus 43 seconds.
Wow.
That's pretty early.
Yeah.
It's not zero.
Right.
That's an example of the limits of our knowledge. Why can't we go back before that? Well, I can tell you a couple of things. One of them is that our knowledge of the deepest physics fails us before 10 to the minus 43 seconds. We don't know how things work when they were that hot and dense. That's because there's a complicated interaction between quantum mechanics and general relativity that nobody has ever figured out. I might say that here in Austin is a center for understanding that. So how do we scientists deal with the uncertainty that comes before the 10 to the minus 43 seconds? Could we say that before that, that's when God created the universe? Part of the scientific orientation is that when we don't know what happened, when we have no evidence for what happened, we don't make up stories. We wait until we've learned more, and we keep on trying to learn more. So much for where the universe came from in our understanding. A second question is, where did life come from, and where did we come from? There are two answers I can give you to this from science. One of them is Darwinian natural selection. What Darwin taught us is that more complex things can evolve from simpler things by a really simple and understandable mechanism. Today, when we have huge controversies with Christian fundamentalists who want to obscure this message, it seems like it must be very complicated to understand, and in fact, it's very simple to understand. We can understand this in terms of frogs. A single frog can lay thousands of eggs. If all of those eggs became mature frogs, the earth would very quickly be covered with frogs. And it isn't. Why not? Because there are limited resources, limited food, water, air, space for frogs. And so not all of these frogs can survive. They have to compete with each other for scarce resources. Among all these thousands of frogs, there are minor differences. And because of these minor differences, some of these frogs are stronger than others, smarter than others, faster than others, hungrier than others. And the better ones beat out the worst ones, and they pass on their genes to the next generation. So the frogs are constantly improving. Amoebas are constantly improving. Humans are constantly improving. And over the what we think might be about 3.8 billion years since life originated, there's been a lot of time for a lot of improvement. And we believe that that is an adequate explanation. How did it get started? That's another subject. In fact, Darwin touched on that subject, but very little. He described a warm little pond where non-living things eventually evolved into living things by mechanisms he didn't understand. There is a recent theory which, to me, is very intellectually satisfying, although I have to say that we don't really have experimental proof that this is the right answer. There's a chemical thing called a catalyst. There's a very simple example of this, which explains the destruction of the ozone layer. Man-made carbons get up into the stratosphere and release the carbon atoms. 2 ozone atoms stick to a chlorine atom. And when they come into contact through the chlorine atom, they turn into 3 oxygen molecules. And then they let go of the chlorine, which releases it to go on and do it again, so that a single chlorine atom can destroy a zillion ozone molecules. Imagine, again with Darwin's warm little pond, that you have, and this doesn't need to be a pond, it could be a deep-sea volcanic vent, or in fact, in a recent theory by Tommy Gold, in a book called The Deep Hot Biosphere, he argues that there's a whole biosphere living in the interstices of the rocks below the surface and living on upwelling primordial hydrocarbons. In any of these locales, you could have, among a zillion different species of molecules, you could have a molecule A which catalyzes the formation of another molecule B. And a molecule B could then catalyze the formation of a C, and C catalyzes D, and so on, until perhaps at some point you come to a molecule Z, which catalyzes the formation of molecule A, closing the loop. That closing of the loop is like a crystallization, which could be the first living molecule. Because once that molecule is formed, it can make innumerable copies of itself, and then you have competition for scarce resources. You have minor variations from one generation to the next, and Darwinian natural selection sets in, and that can take us all the way to ourselves. I think that's enough said about questions of fact. Just as everybody else, we atheists, we scientists, also have big questions of value. Among Christians, among Western religion believers, there's an answer for what is the source, what is the origin of value, which is God gave it to us. God decreed what is good, what is right. And I find the problem in believing this because I can think of 2 ways to interpret what that means, and neither one of them makes sense to me. The first way is to say that anything God defines to be good is, by definition, good, and we have to accept it because he's the boss. Well, even in the Bible, in Genesis, there are cases where God has decreed what is to be done, which I feel are reprehensible. An example is that when Moses and Aaron and Joshua came back from slavery in Egypt to conquer the land of Canaan, God gave them instructions as to how to rape and pillage and murder. Because God was giving the Jews that land, and the Canaanites who were there before had no right to it. Thank you, but I find that reprehensible. And I feel that I have the right to regard it as such. Another example, again in the book of Genesis, is where Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, the sister of Jacob's 12 sons, falls in love with a non-Jew. And his family comes to her family and says, our son loves your daughter and wants to marry her. We would like you to accept him. And the sons of Jacob gathered together and formed a plan. They went back to the man's family and they said, we will accept you if you will convert to Judaism. And to convert to Judaism, you must be circumcised. This is not a pleasant thing to go through as an adult. It may not be a pleasant thing to go through as a baby, but we don't hear much about that. When they agreed to this, and they were recovering in pain in their tents, the sons of Jacob fell upon them and slew them. And they thought they were doing the will of God. Yeah. Perhaps they were mistaken. I regard that as reprehensible.
Yeah.
So, are we required to accept the word of God because he's the boss? Another possible alternative is that God is good. God couldn't tell us that something reprehensible is in fact good because he adheres to a higher standard. If that's the answer, then really God's endorsement of that higher standard is irrelevant. What matters is the higher standard. To me, when I seek the source of goodness, the source of value, it's to be found by looking inside myself. And all of us find our sources of value by looking inside of ourselves. I have to tell you that I'm not entirely satisfied with my own answer to this. Because I don't know a good response to somebody like a Hitler who tells me that when he looks inside himself, he finds goodness in killing Jews and Gypsies and Slavs. I don't know how to tell him that what he experiences good, I experience as evil. And, of course, I can stop him by brute force, but what if he wins? That should do it.
Well, we've got a lot of callers on the line. That
was excellent.
That was an excellent presentation.
Yeah.
And let's go straight to these callers.
Yeah, talk to Ms. Mary.
Hello, Mary.
Hi.
Hi. What can we do for you, Mary?
Well, the level of intellect, I just can't resist calling when it's this good, okay? There's not a lot of opinion here, and I don't listen to very much opinion anymore, unless it's Vladimir Nabokov or somebody like that, and there's not that many of them. So let's get back to reality, which I find science to be. I watched a debate just earlier on Book TV about biomedical ethics, and they're dealing with the question of value on... A few people are dealing with it on a real profound level, which is something we should all be doing, okay, because it's a very important issue. I think pretty much the future turns on it because they're doing some things with biomedicine that are like medicine for medical futility and things like that are really, really ethically questionable. But what I really called about was I watched the debate on human cloning on C-SPAN a few nights ago. I had to stay up till 5 o'clock in the morning to see that whole thing. But in the end, it paid off for me big time because I understand. Recently, they've found a lot of problems with cloning, that a lot of the clones have problems with them, you know, like and dying. They die or they get sick or whatever. They're not... the immune system's not there or whatever. What I figured out is that it gets to natural selection again. The natural selection that's taking place in mitosis and meiosis, which is the basic cell reproduction, where the cells become a zygote, where the ovum and the sperm become a zygote, that's where the natural selection is taking place, where the best genes, the strongest genes, are being sorted together to produce the best organism that it possibly can, without politicization and all of those other things. This is just true biological science. And that's where the problem is with human cloning, and that's where the question of values comes back. If you bypass natural selection, what you're saying is that, well, this person is worth cloning more than this person. And we really can't, we're really not there to make those kind of judgments yet, because we're so politicized. Okay, I'll use a neutral word. We're so politicized by our history and our social views and prejudices. Okay, I'll get to that word. It's there, that we're really not in a position right now to be making those kind of choices where I'm not saying stop the research. I'm saying don't expect more from it right now than it's possible to get from it, okay? That's all I wanted to say.
Do you have any reactions to that?
Well, I mean, was this a big concern that was being voiced? Like, for example, on the debate on C-SPAN, they were afraid that human cloning might be just this new tool for eugenics to create some kind of master race or something. Is this a big ethical concern? Because
that was there, and I'll tell you who was there that made me really kind of laugh. You know Rael, that guy that
Oh, boy. We were just talking about Raelians before we went on the air.
Yeah,
he was on there talking to Congress about, but what the problem with him being there was that he's just doing it for money, okay?
Well, yeah, he's doing it to promote
gains.
his...
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Please.
My understanding of the problem with human cloning, or in fact any cloning, is that when you take a cell which is not sort of originally destined to be the source of a new life, there are genes which are naturally turned on in a human zygote and are not turned on in these clone cells.
Right.
And the result of this is that really the scientists who are doing this don't understand yet how to work it right. They don't know how to make things turn on in the right order. And so things get screwed up. There's another thing that I've read about, which is that if you take human cells and culture them in a medium like agar and let them divide and divide and divide, it turns out that there's a limit on how many times they can divide.
Yeah.
Right, we talked about that.
And if you clone a whole organism from an adult cell, you are looking at a reduced number of remaining divisions that are possible, and so such an organism would have a shortened lifespan. It's okay, I guess, to experiment on this sort of thing with laboratory animals, but I can see that there would be moral concerns about creating a human like this.
Yeah, they only live for a couple of years, perhaps, right?
Right.
Right.
Because that's what's happening with all the sheep and the cattle that have been cloned. It's like they
die
keel over very quickly, and,
Yeah.
and they sing fine, and then...
My comment, just to kind of close this off, is that if we cloned a human being and what we got was a kid with heart problems and shortened telomeres in his cells that were going to limit his potential lifespan, that's a bad thing because it's a horrible waste of that effort. It's going to be a horrible life for that child, right? But those are the reasons.
Yeah.
The actual real effects of what we do are the reasons, on which we should decide whether we should do it or not.
Right.
And not some guy in the sky who has some problem with it or has reserved the power to make human beings for himself.
Right.
Right.
No problem problem with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your call, Mary.
And that is the main. There was recently, Time Magazine did an article recently on human cloning, and a poll that was done among people who objected to human cloning. The overwhelming majority of them objected to it for religious reasons.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of sound reasons to object to human cloning, but those really aren't the valid ones. So you're right. I think it's the consequences of your actions that determine
Actual consequences.
Precisely.
Right? I mean, when automobiles were invented, right? I mean, they only caught on after many automobiles that weren't very reliable and broke down a lot, And
Or planes.
It was refined, or airplanes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, any new idea like that does not catch on, does not become a good idea for us to engage in, on some kind of massive scale until it works.
Yeah.
And that's really the same question. I mean, the difference here is that a broken car is just a piece of machinery, right? And a broken human embryo is potentially a person that might have to live with that problem himself.
And that's not good.
Let's go on to the next call.
Mr. Reed.
Reed?
Yes, sir.
Hi, Reed. What can we do for you?
Sorry to keep you waiting so long.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks for staying on the line.
I have a question. If there is no God and the human mind creates right and wrong, or these ideas of good and evil, then why are people who are murdered? I mean, why should we even care about them at all? I mean, ultimately, our birth is an accident, our death is an accident, our life is an accident. The ultimate solution, or the ultimate end to atheism is despair. Why?
Well,
say,
that's
for
what you
instance,
think.
Madeleine
We would tend to
Murray
disagree
O'Hare,
with
why
that.
should I care if she was
Okay.
murdered?
Okay.
I mean, because it's survival of the fittest, right? I mean, how would you
we'll answer
handle that?
Okay, wait a minute. Well, I want to take this myself. Survival of the fittest, that phrase is actually a rather unfortunate oversimplification of what evolution is about. But even given that, all right, if just because survival of the fittest happens, just because evolution actually occurs, and less fit beings are weeded out by nature and don't pass on their genes with as great frequency, and so the more fit ones tend to survive. Just because that happens, that is not some kind of imperative on us to act likewise. Volcanoes explode. That actually happens. Lava runs down mountainsides and wipes out villages and kills people. Does that mean that we should do likewise? No. I mean, the unpleasant facts, about the savageness of uncontrolled nature are just facts. None of them are instructions on how we ought to behave.
Okay.
To answer your original question, I don't think it's a question of what we should do. It's a question of what we do. We do, in fact, feel bad when people are suffer unnecessary pain and suffering. We do, in fact, feel that way. And the reason we do, I think, is because we're evolved from many generations of social creatures that needed certain emotional impulses to get along and work together. But the fact is, that's what we are, and that is the way we feel.
Well, there are
And
some.
it's why reject what our actual feelings are in favor of latching on to some, misguided, just parroting back of the way that nature, which has no mind and no goals of its own, and just churns along doing what it does. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah, and I don't understand the basis for reaching the conclusion that whatever the means of our coming into existence was, whether it was by the result of a divine act or whether we are simply evolved organisms from nature, what that has to do with how we feel about how we live our lives day to day. Why should one fact cause us to be any happier or less happy than the other fact? The fact of the matter is, we're here, we have lives to live day to day, and because we are sentient beings, we seek pleasure in that experience, and we seek to, not only for ourselves, but for the people around us, we seek to have a happy and fulfilling existence. And whether we were put here by a God who felt like putting us here, or whether we're the result of some form of natural process, I don't see should have any bearing on how one views one's happiness at the simple fact of being alive. I've never understood this whole idea that one must believe in a deity to have a sense of happiness or purpose.
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about
Well, yeah,
where
you said
does
that the
right
end result
and
of it.
wrong come from?
Well, you
Who
said,
defines right and wrong? If
We
it's
do.
the human mind,
In fact,
then why is
we do.
your definition any better than mine? I mean, let's say you walk out of the studio,
Well,
somebody blows you
well,
away.
what's
Why
gonna
is that
happen-
wrong?
well, here, let me. Can I answer Reed?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Reed. Here's the difference. Okay, I think there's one explanation. Okay, for example, to say that because the naturalistic explanation, which is because we're social beings, we have to formulate certain behaviors that benefit each other in order for our species to survive.
Okay.
We all have to work together to survive, and this is how, when, as you said, if you walk out and someone shoots you and kills you, well, this is understood as being, like killing other people results in their being killed, so that's a thing we shouldn't do.
I have a
and
comment.
it's an observable fact. Okay, it's an action that results in a consequence that we can observe, and we make our moral and ethical decisions based upon that.
And the KKK has one definition, the Nazi German has another definition.
Well-
who's to say who is right?
Dr. Glasser?
Yeah, I would say that we should regard Darwinian natural selection as applying to groups of people as well as individuals. And if you could imagine two groups of people, one of which had mutually caring behavior, and the other of which was a war of every man against every man, then it's clear that the second group of people would quickly go to extinction while the first would thrive. And so it's simply a matter of the same natural selection that groups that experience feelings of altruism, love for each other, will thrive better than others.
And so I guess my question, Doctor, to you would be, if you're a black man in 1800s or 1700s America, I mean, why is it wrong that you're a slave? I mean, there are people today who stand on, civil rights and human rights and equal rights and all that. Why is that wrong? Because society says that, you're two-fifths the value of white folks.
I think you are confusing two different issues. If you are a black man in 1750, let's say, and you are being held down by superior force, if you are a Jew in Nazi Germany and being held down by superior force, the issue is not one of right or wrong, but one of force. I mean, I know if I am a Jew in Nazi Germany that what's being done to me is wrong. I may not have the power to stop it.
But why is it wrong? How do you decide that is wrong? By whose definition is that wrong? It's not wrong to the Nazi German.
By his own definition. Let me ask you a question. You mentioned the KKK. Does the Ku Klux Klan run the United States? No, right?
What does that have to do with anything?
Well, I'm going somewhere with this.
All right.
Just play along, okay? They don't run the United States. They're a weird little fringe. Well, how come they're a weird little fringe? They're a weird little fringe because the vast majority of people look at them and go, ew, that's horrid, right?
So majority
Now, why do
opinion
people go
defines
that
morality.
way? Why do people react that way? Well, there are two main reasons. One is that we have shared inherited instincts that in most people lead us to be repulsed by the kind of behavior that those people display. And the other one is that we have a society where the general consensus is that, people of all races have equal rights, right, and have equal value, right?
How would you answer the question of Dr. Martin Luther King in the 1960s when his society said "do" to the black man?
Yeah.
And there was a tremendous pressure against the black folks and oppression in the 1960s.
And there was then what? Competition between those different points of view. And the point of view that won was his, because his point of view was the one that worked better.
But he didn't live in the 1990s or the year 2000.
That's very true.
There could be horrifyingly evil things about our culture that most of us take for granted and think are perfectly okay. And there could be minorities living among us right now who look at what most of us are doing and say, ew, And when they get their word out and their point of view on what is right and wrong competes with the prevailing one, it may be that in a few generations that their point of view will be on top, and that will be what is widely regarded as right and wrong. That's just the way it works.
Yeah, I think what you're illustrating is just a very simple fact that times and attitudes do change. We're constantly part of being the kind of species that we are, this socially interactive species, is that we are part of the end result of our interacting with one another all the time is that we're learning things and we're growing and not just simply as individual human beings but as a species. We're not infallible, of course, and there will always, of course, be prime misfits out there rocking the boat. So there is that factor of individualism, but overall, society has these behavioral and cultural trends that are formed when new attitudes are, as Jeff indicated, brought to the fore and people begin to realize, you're right, we should rethink this idea. Maybe it's not right to own people in bondage as slaves. Maybe it's not right to deny people economic or professional opportunities because of creed or skin color. Maybe it's not right to pay women differently than less than men, even if they're doing the same job. Maybe we should.
That one we're still struggling
and we're
with.
still struggling with that one. So, so it's a constant process that we're going through, and we're learning from one another. And the question that you bring up, of course, is a valid one. Who decides what's right and what's wrong, and why is it wrong? Why is what's right now wrong 50 or 100 years ago? Those are questions that sociologists ponder all the time, and the answer is we're working on it. We have to keep working on it and work together. That's how we survive.
Cool.
So
okay, thanks a lot for your call, Reed.
So I hope we answered your question, Reed.
Okay, let's go to Steve.
Line 3.
Steve?
Hey, how you doing?
All right.
We're good. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing okay. I'd like to follow up on that last call. It's quite interesting.
Okay.
Looks like you guys are saying that the majority of people will make the decision for society. Is that correct?
That is what happens. That is what happens.
So when we were in slavery days back in the 1860s, that you're saying that in that particular time frame, the majority opinion was that slavery was okay.
Was that false? That was the majority opinion.
And you agree that there's nothing wrong with that because the majority agreed that was okay.
No, we're not saying there's nothing wrong with it.
Were I to travel back in time, I would be horrified.
Yeah. We're not saying that
now, what you guys are telling me is that now you've defined what I would consider to be a moral absolute. You have declared that that's morally wrong. So you've got a conscience that's deciding, making a factor in your mind, come up with a decision that slavery is wrong, and what Hitler did was wrong. By the way, Hitler did embrace Darwinism to the highest extreme.
And also embraced Christianity, but okay.
Well, he said that killing Jews was doing the Lord's work, but that's beside the point.
Let's not go. All right, never mind. Let's not go down that path.
But my point is that
stick to your point.
That you guys have agreed that there are moral absolutes. Now,
no,
my
we haven't.
No,
we haven't. We have said nothing about moral absolutes.
So what's wrong with actually going and committing a murder?
Because
why is that wrong?
What do you think is wrong with committing
What is wrong with going and committing a murder?
I'm asking you the question.
You tell us why.
I just asked you the question for you to answer.
Well, I can tell you. I just want to see if my answer would jibe with yours.
Well, go ahead. I asked you first.
My answer is what's wrong with committing a murder is that it results in someone dying. Okay, that's what I think is.
What's wrong with that?
What's wrong with that?
If you believe that there's.
Are you seriously telling us you think there's nothing wrong with somebody dying?
No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah. So why are you asking us that question? Why are you pretending to disagree with us?
There is no God, and your life was an accident.
Yeah.
Your death is an accident. And we're here. We're just an evolved.
If there is a God, there are no moral absolutes.
Hold on. We're just
there is nothing about
primordial slime.
Would you mind repeating the section of your presentation that explains
Wait a minute.
why
there is no
the existence of a God does not create real moral absolutes?
Say it again. I didn't hear you.
If you don't mind,
okay. You or me?
You may, if you'd like to just do it again. You did it so good the first time.
All right. What I said was that we have a choice in interpreting the idea that God gives us values. The first choice would be to say anything he says goes because he's the boss, and we have to accept it whether we like it or not. The second possibility is that if he says something is good, it's good not because he says so, but because he's adhering to a higher standard. If that's the case, then his endorsement of that higher standard is really beside the point. The higher standard is the thing we should be focusing on. So to me, it makes no sense to say that this God gives us the word on what's good, what's right, what's valuable.
Yes,
Okay,
in philosophy.
okay, fine. So, see, that's what I thought you guys were saying. So you basically determine what's wrong and what's right.
No, I didn't say that we determine that.
Okay,
Actually,
well, what do you mean?
Well, we all do.
my view is everybody has to determine it for himself by looking inside himself. And
Okay, fine. I determined that this person's life is not valuable, and I destroy that person. Now, why is
in
that
some
wrong?
sense, some sense, I agree with you about the dilemma. The fact is that, for example, when Hitler looked inside himself, he saw that it was right to kill Jews and Slavs and Gypsies and blacks.
And African Americans and handicapped people. That's part of Darwinism. We went in and tried to eliminate
Yes,
I don't know where you get that idea.
I agree with you that this is a philosophical problem to which I don't think we have a good
I don't
solution.
know. It's one of the here. In fact,
All right.
in fact, it has a name in philosophy. It's called the Euthyphro dilemma, which is if you accept the notion that morals are a code of behavior handed to us by a god, then there are two issues that you need to resolve immediately. Well, actually one, and that is, where did God get these moral precepts from, and why these moral precepts and not others? Either he came up with these moral precepts himself. He just decided, "Thou shalt not kill," in which case he just came up with that. In which case, it's every bit as arbitrary as it would be if we all, as a culture, just decided murder should be illegal because we think it's wrong. The other possibility would be, but the other possibility would be
because you think it's right.
Well, the other possibility would be that God got these moral precepts from somewhere.
Oh, God got them from somewhere.
No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying these are.
I'm going to stop you there, Martin, because you're just repeating
Yeah.
what Dr. Glasser just said.
I'm just trying to make it.
Where do you? Let me ask you a question, caller. Do you think that there are moral absolutes?
Absolutely.
You do think that there are moral absolutes. Where do they come from?
I think they come from God.
Where does he get them?
I don't know the answer.
Okay, so you think that there are moral absolutes, but you don't know where they come from.
No,
you
I
have
told
no
you they
idea
come from
why
God.
they are absolutes.
Well, why do you feel that murder is
I'm asking
wrong?
you now. No, it's my turn. I'm asking you now.
I've already answered the question.
You don't know. Okay,
I told
when
you I
you
feel
know,
they-
you
they-
call us back, and when you can explain your position to us, we'll take you seriously.
I've already
How's that?
explained my position to you.
Okay.
I told you they come from God, and they're printed out for you in black and white in the Bible.
And why? And where did he get these moral precepts from?
I don't have
Mein
the answer
Kampf
to
is
that.
also printed out for me in black and white if I cared to read that particular hideous book.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that being printed in black and white is not the issue. How come the set of moral absolutes that you adhere to, how come you think those are the real absolutes and really count?
Well,
Why?
Because that's an extremely long answer, and it'll take up the rest of your show. We can go into historiological, we can go into archaeological evidence to support the Bible, but that's not my question.
But your argument would boil down to because you think you've got proof that this God actually exists.
I
will grant you for a moment that your God. I will grant you, for sake of argument, your God actually exists. Now tell me, how come that list of moral absolutes in the Bible is the one unquestionable set of moral absolutes?
Where do you think we got our laws, guys? Where do you
We
think
made them up. Where do you think we got them?
Where
We
did
made
get
them
these
up.
laws? I'm asking you, where did the laws come that are on our books today in all the states around America? I'd like you to answer the question.
I would like to read to you something from Thomas Jefferson.
I guess you're not going to
The
answer the
Christian
question.
God can easily be pictured as virtually the same God as the many ancient gods of past civilizations. The Christian God is a three-headed monster, cruel, vengeful, and capricious. If one wishes to know more of this raging, three-headed beast-like God, one only needs to look at the caliber of the people who serve him. They are always of two classes, fools and hypocrites.
My goodness.
Thomas Jefferson. So if you intend to argue that this is a Christian nation and that our laws all come from the Bible. You are completely full of it, caller.
Well, you want to tell me where the laws come from then, Mr.
Yeah, we make them up. We've been going over this.
You make them up.
We make them up
based on our opinions about the based on our opinions of how good certain kinds of behaviors are for us individually, for our culture, for our society, for our ability to get along with other people.
And we the people of the United States, in order to create a more perfect union.
That Nazism and the elimination of the African Americans, the handicapped, the mentally handicapped, as well as the Jews, how can you explain to me that was wrong?
Caller, we're going to let you go. And
we're going to answer you again. We got 5 minutes left.
Have a comment?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Amanda,
Most of the moral things in the Christian and Judeo-Christian Bible and other books are cribbed from the Code of Hammurabi, written by Babylonians.
Okay.
Written in stone.
Yeah.
Amanda's reminding us that much of
pharaohs who were called gods and they believed because they thought they were
we have to cut you off. Amanda's reminding us that, in case that didn't come out over the speakers, that many of the rules in the Bible were cribbed from Hammurabi and other earlier sources.
Yeah.
The point is, caller, that we decide what works, what we think is reasonable, and when there are problems, people complain, and they get heard to a greater or lesser extent, depending on what kind of government we're running. All right. In the olden days, it was much more difficult for somebody who disagreed with the standard morals of the day to get heard and taken seriously. Now we have mass communications. We have much more equal rights for everyone. People get more of a hearing, and we work on it. And that's really the only answer.
Yeah, and it's based on the observable fact that actions have consequences. And if the simple fact that murder results in a guy being dead, and you still have a hard time figuring out, guys, why is that wrong? I don't want to meet you in the dark at night.
Any last words?
Wow.
I could say that I've enjoyed it.
It has been interesting.
Yeah.
We've had that particular caller before.
Boy, should we? I don't know that we have. Do we have time for?
I can give you another couple of quick Founding Fathers quotes.
Yeah. I guess we're not going to take another.
No, we're not going to take another call.
We're sorry, Cody. We're sorry, Mike.
Thanks for staying on the line. Please call us back next week. We will be back again.
Yeah, try calling early in the show.
Here we go. John Adams. The doctrine of the divinity of Jesus is made a convenient cover for absurdity.
My goodness. So we got another minute or two
Paine.
to kill.
Let's see. Accustom a people to believe that priests and clergy can forgive sins, and you will have sins in abundance. Thomas Paine. James Madison. What influence, in fact, have Christian ecclesiastical establishments had on civil society? In many instances, they have been upholding the thrones of political tyranny. In no instance have they been seen as the guardians of the liberties of the people. Rulers who wish to subvert the public liberty have found in the clergy convenient auxiliaries. A just government instituted to secure and perpetuate liberty does not need the clergy.
Mm-hmm. And a final note on the slavery issue in our last minute. I'm just reminded by this book, of course, that the Bible makes no comments against slavery. So this was clearly a humanistic of a movement that came along that determined that was wrong. We determined as a species that it was wrong to hold human beings as property.
Right. Whereas the government of, by, and for the people to get together and decide that that slavery, which is effectively condoned in the Bible, was really a bad thing, and we shouldn't be doing it.
1 Corinthians 7:21 and 7:24 apparently are some
we could do a whole show
passages
on
from
that.
Paul.
All right, folks, thanks for watching. I want to especially extend a thank you to our wonderful crew, without whom we could not go on the air. This is really their show. We're just some morons who sit up here and talk. And I want to thank Dr. Glasser once again for joining us. Mm-hmm. And
visit our website. If you're a Christian, join the Ask list and ask us questions online.
Christians, we don't hate you. We just think you're wrong. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching.
Tune in next week.